I was on my way to pick up some fresh ground coffee beans in the Castro when I saw the new homeless woman. She was about my size. I could see from a distance, maybe stockier. I could tell from a distance about my age. I could tell she had a lesbian vibe. It was a warm day. She was wearing a parka, and she was standing by her full but organized shopping cart. She wasn't panhandling. She didn't have a sign or a cup. She was not making eye contact with anybody. It was like she wanted not to be bothered. But she happened to be standing on the corner where the gay comedy club Josie's used to be in the 90s. And I was kind of a big deal there. And after the shows at Josie's, we would all spill merrily outside to flirt and get high. But now, Josie's was gone, and in its place stood an artisanable, sustainable, wood-fireable, small food portion, which actually I like this restaurant, very good restaurant. And it was next to what was then a construction site for some sort of nouveau Bolshevik capitalist condo that was now casting a shadow over the woman who stood between me and my decaf Sumatra ground for a cone coffee. As the light changed, I got a close look at her. I got a closer look at her. I mean, close enough to turn away immediately and weave through the other pedestrians so she wouldn't notice me and I wouldn't hear her say, "Hey, Marga!" Because I'd have to answer, "Hey, Sid." And then she would say, "How's comedy?" And then I would have to take her home and save her. Because if it wasn't for Sid, I would never have moved to San Francisco. I was 19, I was in New York City when I met Sid in a laundromat. She was tumbling in a dryer. Her buddy was feeding the dryer with quarters and keeping the temperature cool, because Sid was cool. Sid popped out of the dryer laughing and she said, "Hey, we're from San Francisco. Everybody does this here." Sid looked great and wrinkle-free. Her eyes were soft and brown, and she wore one of those sleeveless mesh basketball jerseys with the number 69. They were very popular back then, but nobody does that anymore. Her hair was long and silky, her skin was so creamy and tan, and she looked like the singer Jackson Browne at his most feminine. And I was instantly crushed out. She was like a pretty boy. And back then, I could go for that. Back then, I didn't need a woman to wear heels and French makeup to turn me on. But now I do. But back then all I cared about were pretty eyes and a smile and the word yes. Sid was hot, but I had a girlfriend, so did she. Sid was only in New York for her summer job, driving a good humor truck, which made her even sexier to me. And in September, she would have to go back to San Francisco to her girlfriend. So for the last few weeks of summer, Sid and I would hang out, and she would tell me all about San Francisco, which involved health food. Did you know that you have to drink carrot juice in the first 60 seconds that it's squeezed, or all the vitamins will evaporate, and then you're just drinking orange shit for no reason? vegetarian and a Coke dealer. But I didn't know about the second part till later. When I moved to my lovely San Francisco with my girlfriend at the time. All my stories always involved a line, girlfriend at the time. And in San Francisco, Sid took us to our first vegetarian restaurant, which was called, I'm pretty sure, The Communion. And at The Communion, you could get an entire, badly prepared by white people Indian meal for $4. Valencia Street, $4. But the rule at The Communion was that you could not talk, you could not say a word. You just had to point to this crap and that crap that you wanted to eat. And you couldn't say, I don't like it. You couldn't talk. Okay, this place really existed for many years until a member of the religion that founded it shot the leader of the religion to death. And I feel if only they could have talked it out. Sid also had us over to her girlfriend's house for dinner. Her girlfriend was really rich, and I think Sid deserved that. After dinner, they put out several lines of cocaine, which I had never done before, but I could still feel that coke in my jaw to this very day. Sid's girlfriend did not like me, and my girlfriend did not like Sid, so that was the last time we hung out, and I was really bummed out about it. I mean, ever since that night, I would just think about Sid, and I would play Jackson Browne's In the Shape of a Heart over and over and over again on a record player. And I did that until my girlfriend said to me, I need some space. Which was fantastic because we were living in a very crowded household of Rolfers. Anybody know what Rolfers is? It's a passing fad, but it was very big in the 70s. They were people who massaged you. They put their hands on you until you cried or called the police. I didn't want them touching me, but the thing I really hated about living in a household of Rolfers was that before every one of our house meals, we had to hold hands. And even them, their fingers hurt me. It was time for a change. I broke up with my girlfriend. You know, there was no Craigslist back then, but every coffee shop, there was no Starbucks either. They just had coffee shops. We managed to have coffee somehow. And every coffee shop would have a big old community bulletin board where a girl like me with just a few $100 to her name and no plan could find a place to live and live to regret. So I answered an ad for a room in the DuBose Triangle, which was already known for its booming lesbian population. My landlady was not a lesbian, but she could be described as a free spirit, except she would not let me use her kitchen. Because this was a railroad apartment, and to get to the kitchen, I'd have to walk through her space. My landlady taught fabric creativity classes. Through one of those alternative schools that advertised in those sidewalk boxes. One of those schools like Dilettante Classroom or Useless Exchange, you know those schools. She was really nice. She was really nice, my landlady. She was a nice, diminutive San Francisco lady who had maybe taken too many tumbles in a dryer. One day, I came home to my little room with my one window, which had been given a makeover by my landlady, and she had draped my one window with sheer flowing scarves and dangling bells and those little bird dolls from India with the mirrors on the back. And so now my room was a head shop. And all I really wanted was just to use her toaster occasionally. But she really liked me. She was a nice lady. She began to confide in me whenever she'd catch me on the way to the bathroom, which I was allowed to use, to her credit. My landlady was straight as you could be in the 70s in San Francisco. She had an unrequited love for a very popular transvestite in town and made him lots of outfits. And when they broke up because he was sick of those scarf pantsuits, she turned to me more, and she said suddenly that I could use her kitchen. Which I did until the day I just had some tea and toast, and I was walking through her space, and she said to me, "You know, Marga, I have never met a sexually powerful woman before." Which was the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. But I stopped using her kitchen right away. Then, her teenage daughter moved back. Her estranged teenage daughter shows up, and she was tall and buff and rough and had a slightly bigger boyfriend. And they moved into the sewing room, which, depending on the intensity of their fights, was within earshot or gunshot of my room. The daughter took a liking to me, as so many young women do. And she would burst into my room to get away from the boyfriend, and then she would laugh to me about how she should be with a girl without making him crazy. So I went back to the community bulletin board. You know, back then, finding new housing in San Francisco was like calling a cab. And I found a new place, an ethnically challenged lesbian household, where I could use the kitchen as long as I didn't cook anything with garlic or onions or flavor. The best part of living in that flat was that it was directly across the street from a lesbian bar called Scott's. But known to any non-alcoholic as Scott's Pit. I was 21. And living across from a lesbian bar was like living next to a candy store of candy made in China with lead and other carcinogens. But still, after many nights at Scott's, I got to sleep with the bartender, which for all you drunks out there is like the Nobel Prize. Takes me to her house, where she drank some more. And I played with her big shaggy dog, the big shaggy dog with the gem on the gym, and I love that big shaggy dog. And then we had sex. And then when I woke up, her dog had eaten the crotch out of my Lee jeans. So she drove me home, and I patched my jeans up myself. I had an oblong crotch patch crisscrossing my vagina, which is the sign of a sexually powerful woman. So here's the thing, folks, I never planned any of this. I went to San Francisco, I didn't even know it was gay. I just wanted to smoke weed. I just came to San Francisco. I didn't plan it because you weren't supposed to plan things in San Francisco. Now everybody fucking plans it. Oops. Sorry. So now, everybody plans every moment and moments within moments. But back then, things just happened. I lied my way into a job as a cook at a restaurant where all the employees were underground performers and all the customers were therapists. I dated the hot, lesbian waitress slash contact improv performer for 2 weeks. And then she broke up with me because I screwed up her brunch. How many of you have ever broken up with a woman? Have you ever heard these last words? Have you ever heard these last words? Where's my eggs? But that was cool, because I lost that girlfriend. But I found my way. I found my path. I was working with artists who had second jobs, and I found art. And in that restaurant, I found someone from a theater company who booked me in the show, and I toured Europe. And when I came back, I started doing stand-up comedy in San Francisco, and then a gay comedy club called the Valencia Rose, just across the street from here. And then I started doing comedy and started getting paid, and then another gay comedy club called Josie's opened. And that's where I really started to get a career. And in the middle of all that, I saw Sid. I saw Sid, okay, but not as good as she used to be. I was on my way to a gig at Josie's, and I heard her say, "Hey, Marga." I turned around, it was Sid, and she looked so good, and she had a cane, and she said, "How's comedy?" And I said, "It's pretty good. I'm going to a show. You want to go?" She goes, "I can't. I got stuff to do, but I'm proud of you." I said, "All right, thanks." But I didn't thank her enough, and I never thanked her enough. And now here it was, 10, 15 years later, and I saw this woman with the shopping cart. And this was my chance to thank her again. But she didn't want to be bothered. But it was around Christmas. And so I walked over to that corner where Josie's used to be. That corner in the Castro. That corner we tried to keep the spirit of our community alive. I walked over to her, and I got real close, closer than I've ever gotten to her. And I put a big bill in her hand. I said, "Merry Christmas." And she looked at me blasé, and she said, "Thanks." And it wasn't Sid. Not at all. There was absolutely no way that was Sid. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. You know, unless I wear these glasses when I go out, I don't really know what I'm seeing. I don't even know who's here. I know. I'm sorry, but you know what's great about that? She got $100. And Sid doesn't have a shopping cart.